so you guys ready for the class?
Yeah.
Send me comments. Is Aurora on the? He's not on this camera, right? Aurora.
What?
Aurora is not on this camera, right?
No.
Yeah. This one. Yeah. Okay. Good. So, you guys ready for the class? If you're ready for the class.
I'm ready.
Also, in this class, it's going to be a salsa technique class, and what we're going to go through is some of the basic technique ideas, and you can participate. This is going to be more kind of informative class in a way that we will work and we will do stuff, but at the same time, I want you to ask more maybe technical questions so that we can go and go through. So as a review, what we're going to do is we're going to review some of the basic, and these basic technique ideas, the challenge is that we always push our bodies to develop more. So just the basic technique doesn't mean that once you either understand or you don't. It actually is a progression in a way that you can get always better and better and better and better at the basic technique or the fundamentals in a way that your body can develop and be able to actually do the technique ideas to develop the body into a better and better condition. And this is something me, Mila, all of us instructors, we always constantly also trying to improve. So just because we are teaching this doesn't mean that we are not still ourselves trying to improve it. So for example, we start with just the feet. So when you dance salsa, in Afro-Cubans dances, you have the feet on a parallel of them. Or you can even have the heels out. So when you do a rumba, for example, it's by design that the guys have your feet, or the ladies have the feet like it is, for the movement and for the stylistic effects itself. For salsa, we have our feet oftentimes in a parallel or a little bit of a turn out, yeah? And this allows, for example, the hip movement to move and utilize the body movement in a different way. So for example, when we have our feet, we take a foot. There's this called, my mentor has this concept of ball flat. So it's the ball of the foot into the heel always. Ball of the foot into the heel. Ball of the foot into the heel. So this is a concept we haven't talked necessarily much about, but it's a ball flat or ball heel. So when we step, we all step from the ball of the foot. In mambo, etc., it can be on entirely flat foot. Oftentimes, if I'm, for example, social dancing, relaxing, I'm also using entire foot often. But for if you go to a competition, it would be ball flat, yeah? So now we have this. So when we do the basic step on one, for example, we go 1 and 2 and 3. So as you notice, my knees are close together. So often big mistake is we step like this. You check how your foot is. Are they together? Yeah? So when we step 1 and 2 and 3, then we step 5 and 6 and 7. So let's do the basic step now just with this idea. So 1 and 2 and 3. Now, when I'm stepping the basic step, there is kind of ballroom salsa, and the idea in a ballroom salsa is that we step exactly together. Change the weight here, we'll go back, 6, 7. So that's one idea. Now, in reality, in social dancing, we oftentimes especially, but in general anyway, we take the step a little bit past. So my left foot is now behind my right foot. So you see, for example, 1, 2, and 3. It's a little bit past. 5 and 6 and 7. On the 7, you see my right foot is a little bit further than my left. So it's not together. Yeah? So look. 1 and 2 and 3. And 5 and 6 and 7. So 1 and 2. So check your basic now. When you go on a count 3, is it past? 5 and 6 and is it past? 1 and 2 and 3. 5 and 6 and 7. Like I said, for ballroom version, you would come together, change the weight. 5 and 6 and 7. But this is not in reality what we do in salsa. We go 1 and 2 and past a little bit, 5 and 6 and 7. Okay? So that's the feet with the ball flat idea and the position of the foot. Now, next thing, your hips, right? So your hips is going to be shifted, yeah? So first there's this idea of a pendulum, yeah? So pendulum is this idea that we shift the weight from one leg to another, right? This is what we use in the merengue dance, in Cuban dance, version of salsa, etc., in rumba. So we have this idea of a pendulum. What does it mean? It means that your hip bones go from one side to another, right? It's like a pendulum on a clock, right? So try it. So you just shift the weight from one leg to
Now
another.
this is the hip movement.
Hip movement, hello, hello.
This is the one.
Yes. So you go from one side to another, right?
All right.
So next idea is that we are going to isolate our spine and also move the hip in a way that we are rotating it, right? So try this. Look, you're rotating the hip, and when you do this, all these different exercises, your goal is always to try to isolate only the part that you're moving. So when I'm moving now my hip, try not to move the upper body with the hip. So try to isolate your upper body against the rotation of your spine and hip. So look, we're going to rotate and rotate. Now, in order for you to do that, you have to also control this upper body and your spine in a way that you're working also the upper part of the body against the hip motion. So look, if you try to move your hips, for example, yes, you try to work your upper body against this rotation of the spine. So it's not only the work of the hip and the spine, because then your body is going with it, but instead you are also trying to rotate this spine on the hip and lower spine against the upper part, yes? So it's more internal work already, right? So try it. Aurora is doing a good job over there. Behind the camera. Yeah? So look, so try it. Look, you're going to rotate now, so you're going to shift weight from the right foot, and then rotate your spine against your upper body, yeah? Keeping your spine and neck and everything else long, okay? So you notice now that my right hip is behind my left, right? Then I'm going to rotate the other direction. You see, when I bring my weight to the left foot, my spine is rotated so that my right hip is further. You can check yourself on a mirror or just look, where is my hip? Oftentimes common mistakes is that we are just shifting the weight from side to side and there's no rotation of the spine against the upper part, yeah? So this is common mistake. The common mistake is also that we are trying to rotate to the wrong way, yeah? So we are trying to rotate somewhere here, yeah? So in order for the rotation to happen, you have to also check your feet, what I said earlier. If your feet is not on the turn out position, where turn out position means that your feet are turned out, yeah? If you're not have the feet, try to have your foot on a closed position, for example, and now try to move your hip. Yeah. It's not gonna be able to rotate. So you have your foot on a turn out position, and then you rotate your hip, right? Now you're able to rotate it against the spine, and once you have this idea correct, you can try to increase the hip motion, yeah? You can try to increase the rotation of the spine against the upper body in a way that you isolate only the hip and the upper body rotation, okay? And remembering your feet are in a turnout position, you can just learn. So to try to isolate and do this movement. So try it again. So isolate against the upper body. Good exercise can be that if you have a wall, you're trying to keep the hands in place to isolate the upper body so that you just can get the feeling of the hip movement, yeah? If you have any questions at any point, please just ask in a comment section and we're going to go forward soon, yeah? So many of you, in practice and theory, I know you already know this information, but it's a different thing to apply it and develop it as a quality in your body, yeah? So even many of our advanced students know this information, but it's a different thing to have it applied in your body, in your dancing. As soon as we put on music, for example, in order for this to become a natural part of your dancing, you really have to exercise the body and do these movements and little bit develop necessarily, for some of you, the mobility, the flexibility, the ability in the body to be able to do this movement. And the more range of motion you have in these isolations, the better you are able to actually implement it into your dancing. So that's very important. So now we have this movement applied with our basic step. Now most of you already know this information as well, that you apply it, if you want to be more mathematical, in between the counts. So we step, for example, 1, and the quicker our step is with our foot, the more time we have to implement this movement. So we go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So already this one, it makes it harder if you want to really do a good job to show the quality of the movement in your body, because it requires many things. First, your foot has to be in a correct position. Your hip has to be isolated correctly from your spine, and then you have to already have a good sense of timing to feel the movement within the timing. So let's try it together, just as an exercise. And for you more advanced dancers, try to already become more aware that you feel correctly the entire space of the timing now that we go slow, so that you are aware of the sense of timing and that you feel the entire time in between the counts with this fluid movement, isolating your lower part of the spine and the hip as much as you can to feel the movements fully. So let's try. Look, we go. Basic step on 1. We position. Our weight is on the right foot. Now, you try to isolate and remember this idea of keeping the upper body in shape as you move and isolate. So try it. Look, upper body stays in place. We're already taking a step. And now we fulfill entire timing with good quality isolated movement. So we go 1 and, then 2 and, yes? 3, we step only. Now we have a more longer time to feel the movement. Now this already, the more time you have, if you want to show better quality movement, you should then still try to fulfill the entire timing with even bigger movement. And 4 and, now we step. 5, remember what we already said about the foot. The foot is going to be back, we fulfill with the movement. 6 and 7, remember, check your foot. Is it further than your left foot? Are your knees together straight? And then you shift the weight. So let's try one more time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. For some of you, maybe we just do the step, shifting the weight. Yes? Even many of our advanced dancers, just to do this movement correctly and to develop the quality to a higher level already requires a lot of work, yeah? Just because, for example, in our system, somebody is an advanced social dancer, doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in the advanced training team, for example, has the same quality of body movement. Because, of course, as a social dancer, it's not always as necessary, and the goal is not necessarily always to develop the movement. But for social dancers, of course, the priority is to feel good on the dance floor and have fun. But at the same time, to develop more as a dancer, these are very, very important concepts. So let's try with the music a little bit, just to feel it with the timing and this basic movement, okay? And if there's any questions, let me know, yeah? Yeah. Oh. Continuous movement on the hip against the upper body. 3, 4, 5 and 6 and 7, 8. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5. Now basic step. 1 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5 and 6 and 7, 8. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5 and 6 and 7, 8. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5 and 6 and 7, 8. 1 and 2 and 3. Now each step you do should be with this body movement. Side, 5 and 6 and 7, 8. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5 and 6 and 7, 8. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5 and 6 and 7. 1 and 2 and 3. Basic forward. 1, 2 and 3. 5 and 6 and 7. 1 and 2 and 3. 5 and 6 and 7. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 to the side. 1, 6, 7. 1, 5, 6, and 7. Yeah, maybe that's good. So how are you guys doing? Yeah, send me a comment. I know maybe for some of you this is information you already know, but I'm saying that it's still different than being able to really develop the quality of the movement within the time. So maybe somebody can ask if there's questions. We're going to be moving on. Yeah. So that's only about the steps related to the hip movement. Yeah. So again, common mistakes is that you don't have a turnout, which prohibits the correct movement. Another common mistake is that you are not isolating the entire lower part of the spine, yeah? So that you are doing only hips, for example. Another big mistake is that you have a little bit, for example, tight hip flexors, and your spine is not in a good position here. Yeah, and this can be harmful even for the back. Yeah, so you should have a good position on the lower spine to then, when you do the hip movement, you isolate it correctly. Now, another common mistake is that you are not fulfilling the entire time, that you're stepping right on the foot with the hip, for example. We're going to step into the hip right away. So there should be a coordination between the step and the hip movement, so that there's a step, then the hip movement, step, then the hip movement. Yeah, so that common mistake is when you step and put the hip, step and put the hip, step and put the hip right away. If you step, hip movement, step, hip movement, step, hip movement, step, hip movement. Another common mistake is that oftentimes if you're able to develop the movement nicely, this is kind of more advanced mistake in a way that when you do the movement correctly, oftentimes your foot and your knee goes open all the time to the wrong side. So you do the hip movement, but your knee comes in a bad position. So you should control your feet in a way that even though you rotate the hip, your knee goes forward. Yeah. So you rotate the hip, your knee goes forward. Knee goes forward. You rotate, but your knee is looking forward. Yeah. I'm rotating my left, but my knee is going forward. Yeah.
Question.
So, yeah.
Front back step. Is the heel supposed to touch the floor?
Yeah. The heel can touch the floor, but it can be which you mean the
Basic.
basic? Yeah. The heel can stop. It depends. Also, like if you are a lady with the heels, for sure the heel will most likely touch the floor. And then, if you are a leader, it's possible for the first beginner step for it not to touch the floor on a kind of more advanced basic version. And I will come to that later. Yeah, but in the basic idea, what we just covered, there's a ball flat. So you use a ball and then a flat. Ball and then a flat in each step. So in this basic version of the basic step, yes, the heel is going to touch the floor. In a way that each step after step, you come with the ball and then you go into the heel. Ball into the heel. That doesn't mean that your weight is all the way into the heel. It just means that your heel will touch the floor, but your weight is still all the time more on the ball of the foot, even if your heel is touching the floor. Yeah. Now there is another version. We'll come to it maybe later, where you can step in this kind of way, where you push back already, where your heel can be full outside up. So you can see already. I can explain you. When you push forward, back, now you see my heel is up, yeah? And this is another, also here on the back step, I step and I push right away, and in this more advanced basic step, yes, the heel can be off the floor, but when we're talking about the basic version of the basic step, the heel is going on the floor, okay? Not sure if that makes complete sense because it depends kind of like on the level of information in a way at this point. So I hope that answered the question. Other question?
Yeah. Is it like you need to like cross your feet when?
Good point. So look, oftentimes, yeah, this is a good. Oftentimes when we are more relaxed, like let's say if you see me social dancing, I'm oftentimes crossing the foot over, yeah? And oftentimes the more you do rotation from the hip, it even looks like I'm crossing, even if it's not crossed. So what I mean, if I'm stepping forward, for example, you'll see here, I'm stepping, right? And now I'm not crossing, right? I'm not crossing, right? I'm not crossing my step. Now I would be crossing my step, right? But let's say I'm a lot of it, I'm rotating my hip, right? It looks like I'm already crossing. Look, it looks like I'm already crossing, but you can see my foot is still this way. When it's turned out, I'm still not crossed. But there can be that I'm crossing completely, or I'm going back in the basic. I'm crossing now. So, and especially if I'm more laid back on some basic, on a social dance floor, yes, you can cross it. But in a basic version, if we are puristic, even if I'm rotating my hip, it can look like I'm crossing even though I'm not. Because if I bring my feet together, I'm not crossing it, but you can see that it almost looks like I am, right? And my heel is on the back here, and some part of the foot is maybe crossed, but I'm still not completely crossed, right? You can see the difference. So on the pure version, you don't cross, but on the social dance floor, if you do the basic, you can add some stylistic effects. Yes, you can cross, yeah? Boom, boom, you can go back. You can cross the foot. You can cross the foot. Yes, but if you just dance the basic, I'm not crossing. 6, 7. Good question. Other questions?
Yes. Timing wise, how does on 1 and on 2 differ from
The
with
basic.
regard to foot body movement?
Good question. So, we haven't gone yet to the rib cage movement, shoulder movement. Maybe we'll do it the next time. But in terms of just the basic step, there is a difference dancing on 1 and on 2. In a way that on 1, this body movement works in this way. Let's review. So we go 1 and 2 in terms of the hips. 3 and 4. Then 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. If we do it on 2, the weight shifts. It's going to work like this. We step 1, then we shift the weight, and then 2 and 3. Now, on the 4, technically, we're going to shift the weight here. And then we go 5, and we shift, and 6 and 7. Now we go 8 and. Then we step again 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 5 and 6 and 7, 8. 1. Now, why this is such a tricky question is that if we're dancing socially, for social dancing, what happens is that people don't always necessarily think these hip movements in such a technical, detailed way. So what often can happen is that on 2, we are actually flowing through the step in a different way because the pause is in between the kind of the movement in a different way, right? Look what I mean. 1, if we step on the basic, 1 and 2 and 3. Now, just previously I said that the hip movement is now and 4 and, right? But in reality, what happens is that oftentimes we are already bringing the foot on the pass on 2. So look, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So look, 4 and I'm already bringing the foot, which also it comes and it explains the idea when some people say that on 2, for example, feels that it's a little bit slower. The reason it feels slower is because oftentimes during the pass we are already kind of preparing to the next step, yeah, in a different way than on 1. So some people say, for example, that on 1 feels like you're chasing the music. We are trying to catch the beat. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Whereas on 2, some people say that it feels more like you're inside the music. And this is my theory explanation why and where does those kind of subjective feelings come. So look, we go 1 and 2 and 3, and then oftentimes in social dancing, for example, during this pause, people are already moving the foot 4 and 5 and 6, 7, 8 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, 8 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6 and 7. If you want to be more strict on the body movement and technique and timing, 1 and 2 and 3, we finishing this movement first. 6, 7, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. So on 1 and on 2, basically, of course, the weight shift and the body movements just are happening on a different time. Okay, but it's the same technique, same idea, same concept. Otherwise, good question. Any other questions? Yeah. Which one?
So on 1 versus on 2, the on 1 is more emphasized, sharper, the 2 sort of follows.
I think it's kind of like maybe what I'm not sure if I understand the question completely, but it kind of follows up with what I just explained in a way that yes, some people say that the on 1 is a little bit, they feel like they are catching on the music because the pause it's handled or experienced in a different way. So I would say that. So now let's move on a little bit. So we have this hip movement, the feet. Then also let's cover the rib cage and the shoulders. So on the rib cage movement, we also continue on 1. We go 1 and 2 and 3. So it's accented in the same way as our feet are accented. So we go 1 and 2 and 3. And for many of us, it can be hard to even just simply develop the range of movement in the rib cage in a way that is correctly isolated. What are the common mistakes? The common mistake is that we are not even isolating the rib cage and that we are actually having the rib cage stuck in our body and we are just going from one side to another instead of trying to isolate the rib cage from the body. Yeah. So for some of you, if you're a beginner dancer, it can take time to learn to feel and sense your rib cage in a way that is not connected to your shoulders, that is not connected to the rest of the body, and then to be able to develop the range of motion in a way that we can show bigger and bigger rib cage movement. Yeah. So even for me, for example, I wish that my rib cage movement would be even larger. Yeah, to be able to show even more bigger quality movement. But in salsa, for the timing, it goes 1 and 2 and 3, right? And then 5 and 6 and 7. On 1 it goes 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 5 and 6, 7. So it's just a different, yeah? But let's go only on 1. So it's left, right, left. And right, left, right. Yeah? We know this information already. And 5 and 6 and 7. Now, in order to be able to do any kind of good isolations for your body, again, even in the rib cage,